Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Emmy the Cat Lady, and you join me here in Sanctuary Hills for the next part of Emmy's Wasteland Survival Guide. It's been a few weeks since I did one of these, reason being just that I had some health issues and in the process of selling my house. It's now finally on the market. And then I had my COVID booster, which made me kind of unwell for a couple of days. I have to get it twice a year because I'm immunocompromised and all that kind of stuff. So I've just been a bit behind on my content and stuff. But we're back and we're talking about armour and protection today. So in most societies it is considered polite to wear clothes of some kind. What you choose to wear depends on your sense of style, as well as practical considerations like the weather, what you're doing, and what society's expecting of you as well. So in Fallout, you need to protect yourself as well. So clothes ultimately kind of came about as a thing to protect our bodies from the elements, to protect us from the cold, to protect us from the warm. Various protect us from the rain. That's kind of where clothes evolved from. So in the nuclear wasteland, you obviously want to kind of make sure that that's more important, although you do potentially want to add your own sense of style to it as well. So we're talking about armour, and we've discussed of all the dangers that you're going to come across in the wasteland: angry animals, horrific abominations, mutant ghouls, raiders. So you're potentially dealing with teeth, claws, guns, blades, blunt weapons, energy weapons, fire explosives, and even mini nukes. So you're going to want to get yourself some sort of protection, which means you're either going to have to find armour or you're going to have to make armour to keep yourself protected. So you want to protect your most vulnerable spots, so your head, your chest, your neck, and then your limbs as well, and ideally all of the above. I'm quite glad that these games, while some of them do have gender differences, so Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, your outfits look different whether your character's male or female. In Fallout 4 that's less of the case, only really the Grognak costume, for kind of obvious reasons, has gender differences, but all the other outfits don't. But I'm quite glad that they didn't go into the chainmail bikini nonsense that you see in some fantasy RPGs for female characters, where you can basically cover the most, the things that you kind of have to cover for politeness and nothing else, but that somehow stops you from getting stabbed in the chest. Makes no sense, but here we are, and I think it's quite good that they didn't, although, it's interesting. And mechanically, each game does have different ways of classifying the armour and the rating for how effective it is at protecting you. So there's two main kind of numbers that you'll see depending on which game you're playing. You've got damage resistance, which is a percentage reduction that is capped at 90% in your classic Fallout games, so Fallout 1 and 2, and 85% in Fallout 3, and I believe New Vegas it technically is as well, although New Vegas really doesn't have damage resistance on the majority of wearable items. What Fallout New Vegas has, and what the classic Fallout games also had, is damage threshold, which is a straight up subtraction. So if you have a damage threshold of 15, that means that 15 points of damage would be ignored by that piece of armour. There's obviously a lot of other things that go into that, and how the calculations performed, which order it's performed, and all that kind of stuff. So that is very kind of basic summary of what we're looking at. So if you look at any piece of armour, we've got heavy combat armour left leg, so it's telling me I've got 16 physical damage resistance and 16 energy resistance. This combat armour right leg is a bit weaker, so it's 13 and 13. Gappy glasses don't do anything. The chest piece 22 and 37, so and then you can see your ratings down here, so you can see that there's a difference. And then if we look at, say, the Silver Shroud costume, as 15 energy and 15 radiation, but no physical damage resistance. So yeah, it's a kind of interesting one, and I think the added realism that your heavier armour will slow you down more. So if you wear heavy armour, it slows you down and reduces your ability to sneak because it's noisier, it's bulkier, so it would make you potentially less sneaky. And depending on the game, different types of armour will add resistance to different types of damage. So if we have a look here at the leather armour that this mannequin is wearing, so I set up this little diorama for you guys, but we've got, 3 physical resistance and 10 energy resistance. Whereas if we look at the metal armour here, where are we? Yeah, so we've got 14 physical and 7 energy. So this is quite a good system in Fallout 4. The other games that tend to all just be lumped into kind of damage resistance in general. But I think it's quite interesting that you've got that. So, leather armour's better against energy weapons, but isn't as good at stopping bullets compared to metal armour. And obviously a lot of your wearable items will change your special stats as well. So having a look here, we've got the army fatigues on, which do have ballistic weave. We'll get back to that later on. But you can see that the army fatigues give me +1 to strength, +1 to agility. The sequin dress is +2 to charisma. Silver shroud costume gives me agility and perception. So some of these items and some of the unique items will give you things like the captain's hat, gives you +2 to intelligence. So, you've potentially got benefits to certain items for that kind of a thing. Boosting your special stats. Some of the clothing items in Fallout 3 and New Vegas boost your skills, or add an extra resistance to certain types of enemies or certain weapon types, and even radiation. But just remember that putting on a lab coat in real life won't make you any smarter. That's not really how that works. You need to do the work and learn in order to be more intelligent. A lab coat's not going to cut it in real life, but obviously in games it's a wee bit different. And one of the things to kind of keep in mind as well is that you've got this insidious threat of radiation in the Fallout universe and the Wasteland. So having a good radiation suit or hazmat suit could be useful. But one thing to note about that is that in terms of resistance to physical damage, bullets and plasma and things, the hazmat suits tend not to be very good for that. They'll keep the radiation out, but they're not going to stop any bullets or the claws of a death claw. So, for example, if you were to wear this snazzy outfit, wander on the glowing sea, which is full of ghouls and death claws and rad scorpions, it's not really going to help protect you from getting ripped to pieces by a death claw, but at least you won't be irradiated while that happens, I guess. So, something to bear in mind, that some items are useful for very specific situations, but potentially could leave you vulnerable to other things. So again, this varies a lot based on the different games and how they're classified, but you've basically got 3 kind of tiers of armour based on weight, which is a common thing in a lot of RPGs. You do see it in the Elder Scrolls games as well, that you have light armour and heavy armour, and clothing, and the Dragon Age games as well. So, mages wore light armour, rogues wore medium armour, warriors tended to wear heavy armour, all that kind of thing. And it's pretty much the same here. So light armour is typically going to be your sort of raider armour, your leather pieces, and your kind of clothing and vault suits, as well as some of the tribal and legion armour in Fallout New Vegas also kind of comes under the heading of light armour. And the main benefits to clothing like that is that because it's lighter, your sneaking is better, you're harder to detect, you have less weight to carry about with you, and they tend to be more common. So in terms of repairing and modding them, it's much easier to do with the light armour types as well. So they're absolutely fine for the kind of early stages of the game, and if you're up against lots of weak enemies, like if you go into a place that's just infested with rad roaches and mole rats, then you're probably going to be fine. But because they tend to have lower damage resistance or damage threshold, it does mean less protection from the higher level enemies, so the lighter armours do tend to become less useful later in the game, unless you are doing a full-on sneaky sniper type of play style, where you probably find that they'll still be beneficial quite late in the game. And then you've got your medium armour types. So this includes your metal armour, your combat armour, and your synth armour, which I don't think is actually tying in very well with the road leathers. Let me just, yeah. And your synth armour as well. So these pieces of armour do tend to be heavier, and that does mean that they provide superior protection against most of the damage types. So it's fairly common to see these armours kind of in the mid to late game, and they do tend to have better kind of ballistic resistance than the light armour types. However, the increased weight does affect your carrying capacity, it does affect your movement speed and your ability to sneak. They're also kind of a bit rarer until later in the game, so if you're thinking about having to repair it, or if you're having to modify these pieces, they do take more kind of resources essentially to kind of keep going and to upgrade, so that's something that you maybe want to keep in mind. But I thought we would do this in Fallout 4 because it's got the biggest range, plus I can build all these mannequins and make myself a little museum of armour pieces. So yeah, this one's wearing all the combat armour, and then the synth armour. I didn't actually have much synth armour, so I did have to kind of use console commands to spawn that in because I didn't really have much of it, at least not here at Sanctuary. But I thought it would be fun to put these mannequins together. And then we need to talk about your heaviest armour, which is your power armour generally. There are a couple of other non-power armour pieces that are considered heavy armour, but for the most part, when we're talking about heavy armour, we are talking about your power armour. And it does boost your strength sometimes. It can provide radiation resistance, fire resistance, and generally a lot of protection. So the kind of power armour was originally invented during the Sino-American War, and it was aimed at turning the tide in Anchorage to help combat their invisible, stealthy soldiers by basically turning the American soldiers into walking tanks. So it's pretty obvious what the benefits are. You've got the highest levels of kind of protection, so you're looking at 260 ballistic there, 180 energy and 150 rad resistance. And if you look at the torso, it's these are really big numbers for protection against everything really, and the radiation resistance as well is massively important, especially if you are going off into the glowed sea or somewhere like that. And you do get some unique pieces that can give you other benefits. So one that comes to mind is the prototype medic power armour you can get in Fallout 3 that can inject medics to help keep you going. And Fallout 4's modding system gives you all kinds of things. You can add jetpacks, rad scrubbers, explosive vents, and many other modifications to your power armour, so you can really tailor it to suit your play style. The downside is the weight, so you can see, the torso weighs 22, legs and arms are 16.5, helmet's 13, and then so you've basically carrying all this, and while some pieces of power armour do boost your strength, that kind of compensates for that. A lot of them don't. And the weight also does have an impact on your sneak skills, so because it's noisy, it's heavy, it's loud, it makes it harder to sneak. Although if you're a walking tank, do you really need to be worried about you sneaking? You're generally, if you're wearing something like this, you're probably just wanting to go charging straight in and get stuck in rather than sneaking around. So it probably doesn't matter that much. It can also affect your carrying capacity in some games because you're carrying the armour essentially, but because they increase the strength, that does kind of make up for that to a degree. Another downside about the power armour is it is quite rare until you get into the kind of late stages of the games. It's not accessible to you until quite late, except Fallout 4, which does give you it really quite early in the main story, but that I'm not sure whether that was a good decision or not, but in the other games it tends to be something that you don't really get until, you know, you're getting towards the end game, and it means that it's kind of rare, it's harder to find, and that makes it hard to maintain. And the power armour in Fallout 4 is the only armour that actually needs to be maintained, that it takes damage and you have to repair it. Same as you do in Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, which isn't the case for the majority of the armour pieces in Fallout 4. But it does mean that you have to be kind of aware of when you're using it and how much damage it's actually taking, because it's rarer, which means that getting more pieces to repair is a wee bit more difficult as well. You also, in Fallout 3 and New Vegas specifically, you do need to get training to be able to use the power armour. You can't just find it and put it on, because you can find a set very early in Fallout 3 from one of the Brotherhood of Steel people that died when you're on your way to GNR, but you can't use it, and they won't let you use it until you've got access to the Citadel. So the Brotherhood of Steel can give you power armour training. In Fallout 3 that happens when you get access to the Citadel. In Fallout New Vegas that tends to happen once you complete some of the Brotherhood quests. You can also get it from the Enclave Remnants in New Vegas, but again, you don't really get access to them until quite late in the game, because Arcade Gannon's personal quest isn't really available until you're getting quite close to the end game in New Vegas, or in Fallout 3 if you complete Operation Anchorage, which you can do kind of early on. That's probably the quickest route to getting power armour training in Fallout 3 if you've got the DLC, is to do Operation Anchorage, because you can get into it at a low level. It's not easy, but it can be done, and you can do it, and then you've got access to that. So that's, you know, potentially one of the downsides for power armour, is that you have to find a way to get trained to use it. In Fallout 4, power armour is more plentiful. You can find a couple of sets very early on actually, but the change that they have made is that you do need the fusion cores in order to keep it running, and they do run out eventually, so you have to keep replacing the fusion core. So if you're wearing power armour all the time, you're going to go through the fusion cores, which means you need to make sure that you're finding and picking up as many as you can, which does kind of make sense. It's power armour, that would make sense that it needs a source of power, and it has to be a mobile source of power, because if you had to plug it in, it wouldn't really be that useful for you to walk around and fight without trailing a big long cable behind you. So it does kind of make sense, but the fusion cores are actually heavy if you're playing in survival mode. They do take up a lot of weight when you already have quite restricted carrying capacity, so it is something to bear in mind in survival mode, that wearing power armour and carrying enough fusion cores to keep you going can be difficult to do. And it does also, power armour does require some kind of high end and rarer components to keep it repaired, especially when you get to the higher levels of it. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, one of the things which I don't actually have access to in this game is the Chinese stealth armour. So there's a couple of different types of stealth armour that are available in the games. I'll get some pictures for you, rather than switching games, and because I'm not sure if I've got it on any of my save files, but we have talked a lot about how different armour types will impact your ability for stealth. So we do have a couple of sets of armour that actually can improve your stealth and your sneaking ability. So Fallout 3, you can get the Chinese stealth armour as a reward for completing Operation Anchorage, so you get access to a really good set of power armour and power armour training, but you do also get the Chinese stealth armour, which is really, really good. It gives you plus 15 to your sneak skill, and it gives you a stealth field whenever you crouch, which is a bit like having a stealth boy that's just there all the time, which makes it really, really useful. And again, it's another reason why in a playthrough of Fallout 3 you might want to go and do Operation Anchorage quite early on, because you do get some really useful stuff as a reward for completing it. The Chinese stealth armour is also in New Vegas. You can find it in Hoover Dam, but it's not quite as good. You get plus 5 to your sneak, but there's no stealth field, so it's not quite as good. It is available for Fallout 4 via the Creation Club, I believe, but I don't have it. But it is something somebody has modded it into the game, and that's available on the Creation Club if you really want it in Fallout 4. And then, of course, one of the other ones, which is a personal favourite of mine, is the Stealth Suit Mark II, which was created in Big Mountain in an attempt to reverse engineer the Chinese stealth armour, kind of like what they did when they made the Stealth Boys. It's a very chatty, sneaky suit, but it can be very good if you go through all the upgrade quests in order to kind of make it the best it can be. It's a medium armour, which is a bit of an odd choice considering it's supposed to help you be sneaky, but the personality is quite entertaining, and she does also help keep you alive once you have been spotted using medics and stim packs, although be aware that doesn't prevent you from getting addicted. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think the prototype medic power armour also doesn't actually prevent you from being addicted if it's using medics, so don't quote me on that. I would need to double check, but as far as I know, certainly the sneaky suit, the stealth suit in Big Mountain and Old World Blues doesn't stop you from getting addicted, so she'll use up all your medic supply and then probably leave you addicted, so be aware of that if you're going to use that sort of armour. Something to keep in mind. And then the final one is from this game, which is the Ballistic Weave. So it's absolutely one of the most useful armour mods in Fallout 4. So you can get it by doing, you have to do a bunch of kind of quests, side quests for the railroad. So you can do a few of the side quests for the railroad, and then you get sent to find a secret government cache of useful technology, and that gives you the ability to create ballistic weaves. So once you've found that, you have the option of modifying your clothing to have ballistic weaves. So I'll go up to the armour workbench. So this settlement is just pure chaos, by the way, so just ignore it. But yeah, so here we go. So you got the ballistic weave, which uses ballistic fibre, fiberglass and adhesive. So once you've got this, you can add that to normal clothing. It's lightweight, and it's apparently invisible once it's applied to clothes, but it does add a lot of protection. So you can see, you know, the basic one gives you 30 and 30, and the highest, the Mark V, gives you 110, both physical and energy resistance on clothing like this fabulous dress. But you can also apply it to things that you wear under armour pieces, like the army fatigues. Most of the kind of normal clothing is available. Some of the hats, but not all of the hats that are available to you have the option for ballistic weave. But it does mean that if you want to, you know, run around the Commonwealth in sparkly dress with relative safety, you're free to do so. So if that's what you want to do, and I mean, why wouldn't you want to run around the Commonwealth looking this fabulous? Why wouldn't you want that? So the best that you can achieve on a single outfit is actually 182 in both damage and energy resistance, and that's on the Mechanist's armour that you get at the end of Automatron. But if you use it on underclothes like your, you know, army fatigues, so actually what we'll do is just take all the clothes off for now. So yeah, I mean, I have 30 damage resistance just for being naked, but put army fatigues on. We'll get 140 and 110. And then the chest piece. Arms, legs. You know, and that gives us really quite a good damage resistance just for having that, because you've got that on your under things, and then all your armor pieces add up. Makes it really, really good. So you can, if you get kind of the toughest armor pieces and upgrade them to the max, you can actually push your resistances over 300, which is pretty good for outside the power armor. It's pretty impressive, but the downside to it is that it does require some rare resources to make. So, you know, you need your ballistic fibre, and I've got 9 of that, you know, compared to 100 adhesive, 70 fiberglass. Ballistic fiber's hard to come by. You really need to be looking out for military ammo bags and military grade duct tape if you want to make use of your ballistic weave, which you do want to make use of it. It is a really, really useful thing, and I think even if you're not planning on letting the railroad survive the game, it's worth doing those first few quests to get your hands on this before you side against them and take them all out. So definitely do recommend it, because it makes a big difference, especially on higher difficulties and survival modes and things, because you know, you can take an awful lot of damage from enemies, and this does make quite a difference to your survivability, which is obviously what we're here for. So that pretty much covers everything you need to not die, which is an important element of survival. I think we can all agree on that point. But there is more to it than that, because you do need to find a way to live a fulfilling life and to stay, you know, sane and mentally sound in such a horrific environment. So there's other things that, you know, we need to do that are, you know, less important for just not dying, but still important for, you know, keeping ourselves going and surviving and thriving and actually, you know, living life in such a way. So we're talking about things like finding jobs, finding a community, you know, joining factions and things, which you get the option to do a lot. Companions, like, well, there's a few of them pottering about. There's Nick Valentine over there. Not you, Mama Murphy. Strong's in that house wandering about. There's my artificial child, who called me Dad, which was interesting. You know, companions, things like that, and even faith and religion, which can be an important thing for a lot of people. Not for everybody, of course, but that's kind of the beauty of having a bit of diversity in the world. I mean, you know, I'm all for everything. I've got a super mutant companion, I've got ghoul companion, good old Hancock. You know, all for it. Here for everybody, it's great. So those are the kind of topics that we're going to look at next, which is kind of the higher tiers of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we'll have a look at that over the next few weeks. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you have a preferred armour type? Do you choose it based on how it looks? Do you choose it based on the benefits? How do you set things up for your characters? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.